Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final Kelly Green hour of the regular season, playoffs, whatever you want to call it, as the Philadelphia Eagles fell to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 32-9 in the Super Wildcard Weekend, the last game of Super Wildcard Weekend. I'm your host, LG Harrell, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, that was a heartless, gutless, whatever other superlatives, not good superlatives you want to say about this football team. Lifeless. It was awful. It was not what I expected. I know on Friday I had picked, and yesterday on the pregame show, I had picked Tampa to win, but I thought the Eagles would at least fight. They would show some heart. They would show some gumption for the Jason Kelce's who could potentially be and probably did play his last game in an Eagles uniform, for the Fletcher Cox who played well, the Brandon Grahams who played well. You thought that these guys would have came and showed some life, and after finishing the regular season 1-5, and they came out and looked like the Eagles team we've seen for the last month and a half. And it was frustrating to watch, and it was literally from get-go that this team just could not get out of their own way, could not tackle. The offense could look like they had no idea what they wanted to do. They ran the ball twice with Swift on the first two plays. Guess what? He didn't touch the ball again for another quarter. Like, that should not ever happen. Should never, ever, ever happen. And there are a lot of questions going into this offseason. This team is going to look different. This coaching staff better look different. I'm not saying that Sirianni needs to be fired. We are going to have those discussions in a couple of weeks when we do our offseason plan shows. But I don't know how you felt watching that game, but I was just petrified watching everything that went down, because everything we saw the last month and a half, even forget that, everything we saw from week one, even though they started 10-1, they didn't look pretty doing it, Connor, but they came away with wins. But we saw like there were cracks forming, and in the last month and a half, it exploded. And this team that we thought was going to make another Super Bowl run, they are far from it. And I don't know if they have the coach. I don't know if they have the quarterback. And look, I like Jalen, but who knows if is he going on the Carson Wentz track now? We are going to have all these discussions, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on that diatribe. How are you doing, Connor?
I'm doing good, man. No, I mean, I get it. It was demoralizing. I was defeated almost from the get go. Like, I mean, like you said, you had the two rushes with DeAndre Swift that led to 2 first downs, and you thought maybe something could be different, and it just wasn't. It just wasn't. I think at first play in Buccaneers on the Buccaneers side of the field wasn't until like halfway through the second quarter. We were just beat up all through and through. And I mean, even like there was at some points where the defense showed heart. They were making stops. They were getting after Mayfield, but the offense just couldn't. They definitely missed AJ Brown a lot, but again, that wasn't all that happened. Again, it was just a terrible game plan, terrible strategy, terrible play calling, terrible everything. Like, it was great. Like, they did more shorter passes, which was surprising at the beginning of the game. But whether that was just to help Jalen Hurts get comfortable with his finger, I don't know. But like you said, unless your name was Devontae Smith, it was heartless. It was gutless. It was just so sad to see. And Devontae Smith definitely showed he is worth a lot of money to this team, and he is extremely valuable. But
So
also and lastly, they just had nothing for the blitz. That
we're talking
was the
about
most frustrating part of that game. It was blitz after blitz, and you even got a preview the week prior with Wink Martindale of what you were going to get with the Tampa Bay Bucs, and you didn't change a damn thing. It looked worse, but it's because Tampa's got better front seven that can go after you.
And I actually wanted to say that too. You knew what Tampa was going to do, what Todd Bowles does, and they watch film. They know you can't stop the blitz, which is mind-boggling with the offensive line that they have. But when you don't have hot routes, you don't have short play, everything is deep. When on one of the plays, there were two. It was I think Swift, or it was Goddard and Smith running to the right, I saw a snapshot of that play. The middle of the field, nobody was there. Like the Eagles the one time they went over the middle of the field was a Devontae Smith slant on a blitz. He caught the ball, I think 37 some odd yards. Like why it took till game number 19 in the playoffs to do that? I don't know. And then they didn't do it again. Like, okay, but before we continue, as always, follow us on Twitter or X, whatever, at Kelly Greenhour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJRL54. And follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. And if you're joining us live, let's hear it. Let's hear your thoughts on the game, the season. The Eagles disappointed us all. That 10-1 start was a fraudulent start. Fortunately for the Eagles, they lasted one day longer than the Dallas Cowboys. Not that it matters, but I don't know.
If we played Saturday before them or Saturday, we were destined for the same result. So
I understand too. And look, I don't know which one was more embarrassing: Dallas losing at home after having won 16 straight, being the first number 2 seed in the history of the NFL not to make the divisional round. And we can say that because 1 and 2 seeds used to have a bye. Now they have to play, but Dallas Cowboys are in set a record there of being the first number 2 seed not to make the divisional round. But Jordan
it's been the topic of conversation. Like if you watch, like, some of those national media shows, First Take. I know you don't like First Take, but either like that was like the main argument in all these shows was when are the firings going to happen? Who should they hire? And also who had the worst loss, and obviously whichever side you wanted to be, it was almost split dead even down the middle. Except the one thing that a lot of people said was Dallas was hot, Dallas was doing well, and Dallas does super well at Jerry World, and to a lot of people that felt like they just didn't look comfortable, they didn't look good. We've been this way for 6 weeks. It was the 7th. We were 1-5 in our last 6 games. If you were sitting there thinking this game was going to be dramatically different, I was expecting something because it's the playoffs. This could be the last game for Graham, Cox, Kelsey. Go down the. I don't think Lane. A lot of people say Lane Johnson. I think he's back for not even just next year.
He has a couple years left. So
exactly. So and like. If you were sitting there thinking, yeah, we're going out there and we're crushing the Bucs, I think I had to predict my prediction. You have it written down there, but I think I had a pretty close prediction because I thought at least we'd give some heart and some fight. And
you said 27-21 Eagles, and I said 21-17 Bucs.
Yeah, so we predicted it to be close because we at least thought, maybe they could put something into it, but it was clear it was the same. And even when there was bright spots in the defense, there was so few bright spots in that offense, and the fact that it was the same thing over and over and over again, especially with the blitz, like you knew when the blitz was coming because you knew they would bring a couple linebackers up, and they almost 90% of the game they came because why not? Why not? They're not doing anything to protect Hurts anymore. They're not giving him a blitz beater. They're not giving him anything, and it was like all game. Listening to the commentary and Troy Aikman, and he was calling out the same stuff that we've been talking about for the last 6 weeks. And that play where they called out the two guys at why you have 2 people running within 5 yards of each other because they literally, I think Goddard was in front of Smith literally by 5 yards, and Goddard was a little closer to the sideline. That was it. And the whole middle field, like it's hard to put this one on Hurts. I think this was just the epitome of the last 6 weeks of the season and the troublesome play calling and the struggles that both coordinators have had. Matt Patricia, he didn't do it. If you told me it was Matt Patricia or Sean Desai calling the plays, like how we're talking about Brian Johnson and Nick Sean, who's calling the plays, nobody knows. If you were sitting there telling me, oh, we don't even know if Sean Desai might be the one still calling the plays, I would say, I would believe it because a Sean Desai defense and a Matt Patricia defense looked almost identical, and it was infuriating to watch, especially watching what is supposed to be what is our highest paid pass rusher again drop back in coverage 6 times this week. 6 times.
Yes. It's beyond frustrating that's what Matt Patricia thought was going to work. Remember that we were thinking, and I brought it up. potential, and Chad Johnson said it, like the Eagles were playing possum. Maybe they were just trying things. Once they clinched the playoff berth, they were going to try to throw some things on tape that they wouldn't use in the playoffs to try to get, whoever they were going to play to worry about that, and then come out with a totally new game plan. That was like a slim thing of hope. And when they ran the ball the first 2 plays, well, the defense went and got shredded the first drive. Shocking. And gave up a field goal, and they were fortunate to just give up a field goal, by the way. And that game could have been worse. The Bucs could have put up 50 if they didn't have like 7 drops. Mike Evans dropped one that when he burnt Bradbury.
Mike Evans dropped a couple that he could have made catches
they
on.
They could have put up 50 points on this defense. The DBs didn't want to tackle anybody. They were playing 2-hand touch out there, while the Bucs receivers were running right through them, getting to the end zone. David Moore on his 44-yard touchdown run when he went across the middle where Ricks and Maddox collided. Slayo laid. I don't know what the safeties were doing. And then on Trey Palmer's 52-yard touchdown, 56-yard touchdown in the third quarter. I don't know what Bradbury was doing. I don't know what Roby was doing. I don't know what Byard was doing. It was beyond frustrating that they did not want to hit. Like, you can maybe see it if they were playing in what the temperature that was in Kansas City when it was negative 20 degrees outside, or felt like it was negative 20 degrees. Maybe, okay. But they were in freaking Tampa Bay, 60 some odd degrees. Like, stop making business decisions. We look at this defense. Bradbury's gone. Roby's gone. Byard's not coming back. That was a terrible trade by Howie, which we all applauded when it happened. Slay, I think, is going to come back. I don't think you can get rid of both of them. Plus, he's injured now. We don't know the severity of his injury, but I think so. I think Slay will be back at least one more year. All the linebackers are gone. Maybe Zach Cunningham comes back. Maybe. But like, they have to revamp this defense and the coach, the defensive coaching staff. Like, Patricia is gone. He better be gone. Desai, he got demoted, even though he still has the defensive coordinator position, but he's going to be gone. They need to find a way, and this has to happen like within the next couple of days. They need to figure out Jeffrey Lurie, and Howie Roseman need to figure out, are we keeping Nick Sirianni? And if they are, like you said, what did they do with Doug in 2019, 2020? They brought him in. Give us a plan. You can't bring Brian Johnson back. I don't care if he's best friends with the quarterback. Can't happen. What happened with Carson Wentz when Frank Reich left? And they promoted, was it Press Taylor? They promoted Press Taylor to be offensive coordinator. Carson's buddy. Carson regressed. Jalen Hurts regressed. In 2021, Jalen was mediocre. In 2022, Jalen was elite. In 2023, Jalen was mediocre. His contract kicks in 2024. He cannot be mediocre making $50 million a year. He better figure it out. So Sirianni needs to figure it out. And like we've been saying for weeks, bring in an offensive coordinator, let him run his system. No more Sirianni system. This system sucks. It's 5 plays, and they are all terrible, especially when you don't have Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen might be the greatest coach alive, because I don't know how he made this offense look good last year. I just don't know how he did.
Yeah, I mean, that just speaks to Shane Steichen, and that he maybe was we know he was deserving of a head coaching job. I think that just speaks volumes, the fact that somebody else takes the reins. But then you see the report that came out, and it's saying like you never knew on a given week who might have been calling the plays, and Nick Sirianni was overruling Brian Johnson on certain plays. You cannot coach as an offensive coach with somebody else's system, attempting to put your own twist on the system when you're also being overruled. And on a given day, you might not be the one calling the plays. Like that report was so damning that people didn't know who was calling the plays from time to time. The only person who knew would be Jalen Hurts in the headset. And even then, maybe Jalen, like maybe it was Nick Sirianni saying, "This is what I want you to be calling in these situations," and Brian Johnson was just calling Nick Sirianni the way Nick Sirianni wanted it to be played. But Nick Sirianni's just not a smart offensive mind. He's not Sean McVay. He's not Kyle Shanahan. He's not Mike McDaniel. He's not an offensive mind. If he was an offensive mind, he'd be calling the plays all the time and proudly saying, "I call the plays," and taking responsibility for that offense. But he isn't, because he's not a smart offensive mind. He's not a good offensive coach. Like I said before we came on the air, he's a culture guy. And you said, what culture? And I get it, down the backstretch it wasn't good. But look at last year. Look at the first 11 games of the season. While there were cracks, he was keeping things together for a while, and then just everything fell apart. And those reports were starting to come out about the coordinators, and it just all fell apart. And it feels like the locker room just started playing for themselves and not for the coordinators. And they just weren't listening to the coordinators and just weren't there for the coordinators. And when you have people that are just completely separated and like they're not even in the same room, it just doesn't work. It's just not going to work. And that's what happened. And Nick Sirianni has to get back to, being the cheerleader on the sideline, being the hype man, and letting someone run their system on offense and run their system on defense, and keep your hands completely off. And the first thing, if he gets that meeting, which he likely is going to get that meeting, because he had popcorn thrown at him. He has like 90% of Philly wanting his job on a golden platter. So, the first thing I would say going into that meeting, because it's what they want to hear, I will step back from the offense. If that is not the first word out of Nick Sirianni's mouth in that meeting with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, I would probably consider firing him, because that is a fireable offense to continue to hold this offense hostage.
And this is a unique offseason where all the caliber of coaches that are available, Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Jim Harbaugh, Ben, and then the young coaches, Ben Johnson from Detroit, Slowick from Houston. There's a lot of talent, and who knows if Pittsburgh, if Mike Tomlin's going to walk away from Pittsburgh. Like, I would, in a heartbeat, if Mike Tomlin left Pittsburgh and he still wanted to coach, I'm firing Nick Sirianni and handing a blank check to Mike Tomlin. Like, you want to talk about somebody that's going to set a culture, who is going to bring fierceness back to a defense, that's going to bring fierceness back to a team in a city like this. It's Mike Tomlin. Mike Vrabel's also in that caliber, but I would take Mike Tomlin over Vrabel if those options were available. I don't know if it's going to happen. I honestly think they're going to keep. And again, we're going to have this discussion, in a couple of weeks, maybe this week if we hear word, or next week if we hear a definitive word if he's coming back or not. But like, say there's coordinator changes that are going to be made, and the next time me and you get together. But like, I think because he has made the playoffs in his 3 years, but there is precedence, because John Fox in Denver made the playoffs 4 straight years, even went to a Super Bowl with the Broncos. I think went to a Super Bowl with the Broncos. Maybe he didn't go to a Super Bowl. Whatever. He made the playoffs 4 straight years, got fired. They brought in Kubiak. Kubiak went on to win the Super Bowl. So, like, there is precedent. It can happen. Look, we all like Sirianni, but maybe, and we heard Hassan Reddick. There were a lot of players said that they're holding their hand high for him. They want him to stay. But the one person we didn't hear that from? Jalen Hurts. If it comes down, now my question for you, Connor, if it comes down to the $255 million quarterback and Jalen Hurts, or Nick Sirianni, they're clashing, they're butting heads. Who does the owner, who does the GM side with?
That's a tough one, because it's at that point, then you're talking a financial decision. But to that same point, like, do you just say, oh, well, then see you later, Nick Sirianni, let's just stick with the $255 million because it's the right financial business decision to make? I don't know if I agree with that, but I don't know. At this point, I think you're stuck with Jalen Hurts. I think you have to find, if that's really the thing, they're butting heads, and you're going to keep both of them, or you want to keep both of them, you have to find a way to get them on the same page. And I just think the way to get on the same page is Nick Sirianni has to get out of the offense. I think that's all it is. At the end of the day, we heard so much potentially good things about Brian Johnson and Jalen Hurts and what they could do together. And the one thing that has stood out all through this year is the continued reports and talking about, is this Brian Johnson's offense? Well, how much say does Nick Sirianni have in it? Is it Brian Johnson calling Nick Sirianni's offense? Is it like the reports have just been constant about that? So to me, if it's the button heads there, you just have to find a way to disconnect them, because I think that that's where the issue lies, is maybe Shane Steichen did a better job of keeping them disconnected and calling a very vanilla offensive structure and offensive scheme well with some creativity, whereas Brian Johnson couldn't do that, or didn't, with his inexperience, didn't feel he could do it confidently because of Nick Sirianni there as well.
And there are still teams wanting to interview Brian Johnson, so that's going to be intriguing. Like,
I think that speaks volumes too, because I think Brian Johnson can develop a quarterback, and I think he's really good with quarterbacks. And I think this just wasn't like everybody's throwing it on Brian Johnson. And a lot of people are saying, oh, it's just the Rooney rule. I disagree. He's been proven to be a quarterback developer, a quarterback friendly coach.
Why did Jalen regress this year?
So now we just sit here and we wonder, like, because I don't think the truth is ever going to come out about this, but if Brian Johnson just was frustrated and couldn't do anything of his own on that offense, then it would explain the regression. It would explain the reason that Brian Johnson couldn't coach the way he wanted to coach, and why Jalen Hurts couldn't continue to be Jalen Hurts. I know somebody in here was saying it's a quarterback's job here, Scott. It's a quarterback's job to read the defense and adjust, and he has lost. He does look lost out there, but look at the scheme. Look at the roots. Even it was called out last night at a couple times during the broadcast. These receivers get to the top of their roots and they just plant. They don't move. There's no scramble. There's no real support for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is being blitzed like crazy. There's something more to it than just Jalen Hurts and Brian Johnson. I think there's more underlying things there. And that's why I think there's a lot more responsibility that needs to lie on Nick Sirianni and Nick Sirianni. This isn't to say Brian Johnson should stay. I don't think Brian Johnson should stay. I think he needs to go. I think they need to wipe the slate clean of the coordinators and maybe some of the people below them. I don't know the coaching staff all the way through and through to who deserves to be kept.
Jeff Stoutland on the offensive side of the ball.
Yes, Jeff Stoutland. Yep. And Mike Clay deserves to stay.
With Kelsey retiring, is Stoutland going to want to stay?
It'll be interesting to see, because Stoutland, you saw that Stoutland and Kelsey had a moment there on the sideline right at the end of the game. And Stoutland's getting older too, and he's had a lot of other offers too. Maybe he wants to take a year off, similar to Jim Schwartz, and then come back when the time is right, or take some time and think about things. And then, if the time ends up being right or the offer ends up being right, come back. You never know. Jeff Stoutland would just be a massive loss for this team, though. It would be, if you told me I had to give up one of the coordinators, Nick Sirianni or Jeff Stoutland, I would give up everyone and keep Jeff Stoutland. If I could only keep one, I'd keep Jeff Stoutland, wipe everything clean besides that, because you can work with Jeff Stoutland, and look at what he's done. This offensive line has been amazing. And I don't necessarily believe that this offensive line is fully at fault for everything that happened this past year, and for not being able to be, help that much against the blitz. When you're 5 guys going up against 5 or 6, that just doesn't happen on as regular of a basis as it's been happening for this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line.
The whole blitzing thing. 3rd and 2 multiple times, and Eagles go empty set with 5 receivers. What do you think Tampa's going to run? What do you think? Anybody with the brain is going to know that they're going to blitz you. And because they know, A, you're not going to have any short routes. Everything's going to be deep. And B, Jalen's not going to get rid of the ball. And then, it felt like the Eagles had a chance. It was 16-9. They just forced the punt. The Eagles had the ball, I don't know if it's 2nd or 3rd down at the 14. And Jalen takes a safety. That's when the game really ended. It was 18-9 at that point. And the defense, which started off poorly, but really they forced 4 punts in a row or something like that. They started making plays. They started Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham played really well yesterday. Fletcher Cox especially. For 2 guys that are up there in age, you would think the younger guys would have more get up to them. No, the older guys, The guys that we probably might not see in Eagles uniforms again are the guys that really stepped up and played and then gave it their all. Like, and that, like, I hate that yesterday's game is going to be the last image of Jason Kelce in an Eagles uniform, potentially of Fletcher Cox in an Eagles uniform, potentially of Brandon Graham in an Eagles uniform. And not even just yesterday's game, but the last month and a half, 1-6, including the playoff game. Like, that is just not the way. Obviously, like, this is the very next day. It's instant-ish reaction, and give it a couple of months, and when, give it a couple years, give it 5 years when Jason Kelce's given his Hall of Fame speech. It's not going to sit. It doesn't sit right with me but that's how it ended for them. It would have perfect ending, obviously, is the Super Bowl, the Ray Lewis ending, the John Elway ending. But I wish we could have had that for Jason Kelce, for Fletcher Cox, for Brandon Graham.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, like, Brandon Graham, I think, will come back. I think he's more likely to do something team friendly. Fletcher Cox apparently turned down more money last season, and he had a better year this year. So to think that Fletcher Cox is just going to continue to say, "Oh, I'll take less money," which less money was still $10 million, but I mean, he definitely was worth it this year. But to sit there and say, like, this late in your career and the opportunity to make a whole bunch of money or just to stay in Philadelphia, where you don't really, are we in a retool? Are we in a rebuild? Like, what is the state of this whole team in this situation? Because, I mean, we have a lot of impending free agents, but at the end of the day, I look at the impending free agents and there are very few I say we need to bring back, if any. So, like,
Braden Mann, the punter.
That might be the only one. Like, I mean, would I like to see DeAndre Swift back? Yes. Are we going to pay a running back? Absolutely not. It's just not in the Howie mentality. It's just not in the Howie mindset. He'll go trade for another running back who underperformed like DeAndre Swift, or a banged up running back like DeAndre Swift, and get them in the building for, like, whatever, a 4th round pick or 5th round pick, or he's going to go draft one. He's not going to bring DeAndre Swift back. It's just not in his nature to do that. So it's going to be an interesting offseason because we have a lot of impending free agents, but not that many of them are all that important. The ones that are most important are the ones that, are you going to retire? Are you going to come back or not? Kelce is vital. Fletcher Cox is not vital, but he seemed it this year, and I think he'd be very important. I think we know and feel the loss once he's not here. Brandon Graham, great rotational piece, and we definitely need him around because our edges clearly need to get off the field a little bit more and rest, because Sweat has been terrible. Reddick's been dropping back in coverage, but hasn't been all that good.
A new defensive coordinator won't do that.
No.
You would hope so anyway.
I would pray not. But, I mean, it's going to be an interesting offseason. And for, like, a guy like Fletcher Cox, if somebody's offering more, it's getting late in your career. I feel like it's money, or a chance at a championships and money to go. Like, if I like just picking one out of the hat, the 49ers or the Ravens. Let's not talk 49ers. Ravens. What if the Ravens came to him and said, we're going to give you more money than the Eagles? I would probably go with the Ravens for the more money and the probably higher likelihood of a Super Bowl.
It's crazy. You look at this team, and you had mentioned, are we retooling? Are we rebuilding? I feel like they're stuck because the offense is young enough that they should still be able. They need a third receiver. They're going to need a right guard, they're going to need a right guard if Jurgens goes to center. That could be Steen. They're going to need a running back. Can Jalen improve? Can Jalen get better in 2024 than he was in 2023? But then you look at the defensive side of the ball. We just replaced 6 starters. Guess what? We're going to have to replace another 6 or 7 starters. Let's say the set starters are Hassan Reddick, you would think, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Josh Sweat. Beyond that, Reed Blankenship.
Likely, Darius saying Reed Blankenship, and then you're probably rebuilding all the other spots. I mean, you do have Ricks and Ringo in the building, so you wouldn't be completely rebuilt, because I just don't see how we go and starters. They'd be new starters. I just don't see how he going and get. I want him to. I just don't see him invest in a first or second in the cornerback position. I wish he would, because I get it. Everyone's like,
He's
Ricks
gonna
and
go
Ringo,
off-
one of them
he's
is going to
gonna
be
go
the
lineman
answer, but
again. He's going to go lineman again.
that'll be
And we're-
excruciating. I don't know if I can watch a lineman in round 1 again. I just
So, like, we have the 14, so 18. What do we have? The 24th pick, I think, in the draft. They have 3 of the top.
It's 22nd.
What, the 22nd?
22nd.
3 of the top 54 picks, I think, because they have the Saints' second round pick. So they should be able to get an impact player. Like, we always talk about Axeman Jr., Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Is he worth a first round pick? I don't know. Like, there's talk of him going in the second round. I thought he was going to be first round talent. Maybe he will be a first round guy in, come combine time. But if you're able to get Jeremiah Trotter Jr., you sit him in the middle of the defense, then you could put in a Kobe Dean next to him, where he doesn't have to, like, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going to take on all the punt, like, because he's a bigger guy than Dean. And say you bring Zach Cunningham back. I don't know if they will. I don't know if he would want to come back, depending. I guess it's all going to depend on who the defensive coordinator is, obviously. But tell me a linebacker core of Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Zach Cunningham, and say Nakobe Dean. Obviously, it has to be better than what we just saw, even though 2 of those guys were on this year's team. But I think it'll be better because they'll have a new defensive coordinator. Now, this is going to be keto. They have to make that move like yesterday because there are 7 openings, 7 or 8 openings in the NFL. So 7 or 8 coaches are also going to be hired in these other places and have to put staffs together. So if you're going to replace your defensive coordinator, if you're going to replace your offensive coordinator, you need to do that now before they get, picked up and hired by another staff that's being put together.
Yeah, they need to be.
It'll be like last year when Gannon left and you had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to get Sean Desai. And I'm not saying Sean Desai, Sean Desai might have worked a miracle because he was the defensive coordinator when we beat the Chiefs, when we beat the Dolphins, when we beat the Bills, when we beat the Cowboys. And then Patricia comes and the defense got like 1,000 times worse than it was.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. Like, if I don't see reports that we're requesting interviews with defensive coordinators tomorrow, I'm going to start to get frustrated because I think you have to be starting that process, like you said, right away. You don't want the Vic Fangio thing happening again. Well, granted, you won't have a similar situation. You're not keeping these guys in the building. If you're going to keep Desai in the building, he was not going to take a demotion. These guys all have to go from the building. So, Patricia's, he might come back in a senior defensive assistant role again. I don't care to ever see him call plays. If he's buried somewhere in the staff doing some random analytics role, go ahead. But, you can't have Sean Desai there. You need to fire Sean Desai tomorrow. You need to make that announcement. There's no reason to keep any of these people. Sean Desai is not going to be interviewing for head coaching roles. He's not going to get you anything from the Rooney Rule or those aspects of getting like a 3rd round pick or anything. So you don't have to worry about keeping him on staff for any purpose. You need to start looking for his replacement and making that move. You probably will have to put your staff together uniquely. You're not going to build your staff unless they're holding off because they're really heavily considering firing Nick Sirianni, and then they're going to give someone the keys to make the entire staff. Then I understand it. But at the end of the day, I feel very much like you have to build this staff uniquely and quickly, as in start with the defensive side because it's a spot you need to figure out the most, and then move to the offensive side and figure that out. To me, I think, like I said, you just need Nick Sirianni to say, I will give up the keys to this offense. You just need him to just back away and let it be. And then you can start hiring on the offensive side of the ball. But I think that discussion is a deeper discussion that we're not going to be privy to, or that the media is not going to be privy to at the beginning. The defense needs to be figured out and done first because it's the easiest one to figure out. The offense is going to be a little more complicated because you got to meet with Nick Sirianni. You got to figure out, okay, are you going to give up control, or are we going to have to say, see you later? Are you going to move on from Brian Johnson, or do you want to pull the Doug Peterson and say, I don't want to give up Press Taylor? Then we'll be happy to say, see you later. Don't let the door hit you. So it's going to be interesting because the offensive side is going to be different. But at the same time, I'm sure they're going to look for Nick Sirianni's blessing, not that they should or that it should matter on the defensive side of the ball. But I don't think Nick Sirianni should be anywhere near the planning of who's going to be the defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator next year.
Yeah, and if you think about it, look at the pieces on this offense. Like, you should be able, if you're going to hire an offensive coordinator or a new head coach, obviously you're going to hire an offensive guy, Ben Johnson. What's his first name? The guy from Houston, the offensive coordinator.
I think, isn't it Ben?
Is it Ben? Okay, Ben Slowick from Houston. Dave Canales from Tampa Bay.
Ravens offensive coordinator.
The Ravens, Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator. So like if you're going to do that, look, AJ Brown is really good. Devontae Smith is really good. Dallas Goedert is really good. This offensive line, you're gonna have to replace a Hall of Famer, sure, but they should still be pretty good. It might not be the best in the league anymore, but they should still be top 5. It depends on what you do at running back. If you bring Swift back, if you draft somebody late, or you find like what they usually do, find somebody that's looking to be traded from a different team that could trade a 7th or 6th round pick for. There are weapons on this offense. So if you're gonna make that move, like you said, this needs to be done this week, because all these teams, like Ben Johnson is interviewing like virtually, because that's all he can do right now, with like 5 teams. Ben Slowick interviewing virtually with like 5 teams. I want somebody, like, we need to get creative on offense. I'm not saying we need the motion 100% of the time, but the Eagles were dead last in the NFL in motions at like 10%. Like, I want a Mike McDaniel, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur type that can come in here and use the skill set of the weapons you have on offense. Why we avoided the middle of the field all year, I will never understand. You look at like the route charts for Devontae Smith, for AJ Brown, and Dallas Goedert, everything's the sidelines. Why? They have such skills, they can use the entire field. Stop cutting the field into a third or into a half. That was my biggest issue with this offense. And the fact that it just never changed. And again, we don't know if it was Brian Johnson. We hear time and time again that it's Nick Sirianni's offense, and like he said, they're not going to make any changes to it. And if what would suck, Brian Johnson goes elsewhere, whether it's as a head coach, whether it's an offensive coordinator,
and succeeds.
And he succeeds.
I wouldn't be surprised. That would be a hot take, but not hot take. I mean, he's done it in college. I feel like he's got the mind. He can develop a quarterback. I feel like he's a guy, like, he's not getting interviewed for. If he leaves Philly, he's getting a job. He's landing on his feet. Don't get me wrong. Like, Sean Desai, he's going to get a job too. He's not going to be a defensive coordinator. But to me, Brian Johnson I don't think he's going to get a head coach job, but I can see him getting another offensive coordinator role and succeeding. Like, to me, there is a full opportunity that Brian Johnson goes somewhere, and we sit there, and a lot of the fans who have been trashing him all year are going to sit there and be like, wow, I definitely wish we had Brian Johnson, or wow, I wish we had this Brian Johnson. Because then if Brian Johnson goes off and shines somewhere, then everything you heard about of Sirianni's control over the offense is 99% accurate. You think all the reports would be, to me, 99% accurate.
How many people you think are saying they wish they still had Jonathan Gannon?
Not many, but I mean, you look at what he did with the team that he had in Arizona. That's impressive. That defense, they overachieved by a landslide. Yeah. So, I mean, they actually legitimately have their quarterback. Like, Kyler Murray, as much as some people may disagree on the point, I mean, the fact that you have a quarterback under contract, fairly reasonable contract, you don't have to go draft and start from scratch again, that's a major plus. That's a major bonus. That's why I think some offensive mind can come in here and do some really good things, because you look at the skill, you look at what Dallas Goedert could do when used right, AJ Brown when used right, Devontae Smith when used right, Jalen Hurts, you saw 2022 Jalen Hurts. Like, you can look at this, and as an offensive mind, you can probably visualize, I could do so much with this. But it's all a matter of, can Sirianni give up complete control and just let it go and just be the face of the Eagles
So
sideline, because that's essentially what he would be.
Be the John Harbaugh, be the Mike Tomlin. They don't like Tomlin's
John Harbaugh is more of a special teams guy.
Yeah, and Tomlin's specialty is defense, but he allows that defensive coordinator to run things. He's a culture builder. You talked about culture, about Sirianni being able to build a culture, which I haven't seen this year. That's what Tomlin can really do. That's why, like, instantly, if I heard that Mike Tomlin was being fired, being let go, or he wanted to walk away and he was still wanted to coach, I'm calling Mike Tomlin. He's my next head coach. Like, that's who I would love to run my team. Like, what's he have? 17 straight, is it? Winning seasons?
Yep.
Something like that. He's never had a losing season in his career. Like, and he did that with, did you see the slot they had at quarterback in Pittsburgh this year?
It was a revolving door. It was Kenny Pickett. It was Mason Rudolph. It was Mitch Trubisky. It was a revolving door of quarterbacks. And you come out, I think, what were they, 9-8 or 10-7? But 9-8's impressive. That from a quarterback perspective alone, and the injuries that he dealt with, like, he didn't have his bet. Like, TJ Watt had a number of moments where he was injured or missed time this season, and you somehow, like, keep that team together at 9-8. Like, to me, that should have been a 7-10, 6-11 team. And it ended up being a 9-8 team. And that just speaks to someone who can keep a room together through tough times. And that Sirianni wasn't even able to keep the room together through tough times, we've seen that he can have he can have a culture and he can get people rallying. But the last 7 weeks, we haven't seen that at all. And can you get the locker room back?
He can build a culture when they're winning. That's easy because you're not having issues. Everybody's happy. We've seen what happened the last 7 weeks. Like, on the sideline yesterday, now Goddard came out and said that, like, he did something wrong. They weren't arguing, they were just talking. But, like, Jalen and him something was happening there potentially. We've talked about it all year, how when Jalen's not on the field, he goes to, just sits on the bench. He doesn't interact with his teammates. He doesn't, at least the cameras don't show it. Maybe he does, but when Tom Brady does it, when other quarterbacks do it, the cameras show it. Like, it doesn't ever seem like he's looking at a tablet. It just doesn't seem like he's putting in that extra effort, which, again, I'm not saying he's not putting in the effort. But he definitely, something has to change with the way Jalen goes about interacting, I guess, with his teammates. I don't want to say in public, because this is going to sound wrong, because behind closed doors, they could be best of friends. Like, everybody could be best of friends. And obviously we don't see it because it's not on camera. But, like, on the field, when the game's in, when you're on the sideline and a bad play happens or whatever, or somebody misses a block, go up like, hey, we'll get them. You'll get them next time, like something like that. We haven't seen that.
And I don't think that's like, they show him enough on camera that stuff should have. And I tweeted out last night that report that Jeff McClain said that there's some in the Eagles organization who believe that he should change. Yeah, but I mean, I actually agreed with the report, and people were like, "Oh, so if Jalen Hurts changes how he, how he presents himself on the sideline, stuff, we're going to win games." That wasn't the point of the report, and that wasn't my point in agreeing with the report. I believe you look at vocal leaders, you look at guys who are like true, like, I don't want to say he's not a true leader, but like those guys that people look at and say, that's a true leader. That's a guy, like, they're vocal, they're up. Mahomes, we hate Mahomes. A lot of it is just him bitching and complaining about the refs, but he's passionate too. Like, you see, he's passionate. He's a leader. He's getting his guys together. And we saw it with Carson Wentz. Wentz was on the sideline still trying to rally the troops, even when things were at
but my thing about what you just said, he's been this same person since he's been here. They went 14-3 last year and went to the Super Bowl. Nobody complained about the way he acted on the sideline. And again, I could I can take some umbrage to this because I've said I would like to see him be a little bit more vocal on the sideline.
I think we even said that last year, even though he was like when we weren't winning those 3 losses, he just goes, sits there. There's a coach on a tablet beside him, and he's just staring off, completely ignoring everything. Like, I don't know. Like we've said it in the past, especially when we've come across games where we struggled or we lost. But I mean, I don't. It doesn't mean that you're going to get more wins. That was never the proposition. Was you're going to get more wins. It's
I
just
don't
you
want
get
Jalen.
maybe the locker room would have stayed together more over these last 7 weeks if you had a vocal leader going up and down the bench saying, "I got you next time. I know you missed that block, but I got you next
But
time."
I also don't want Jalen to not be Jalen. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want him to be
Agreed.
somebody else. I
Agreed.
want him to be himself. I just hope that he's not following in that Carson Wentz track. Carson got paid, and then it went downhill. Michael joins us. He says Jeffrey Lurie has to fire Sirianni ASAP. We did touch base on this earlier. When they meet, if Sirianni goes in there and doesn't have a plan, I agree with you. Like, he needs to have a plan. What are you going to do with offensive coordinator? What are you going to do with defensive coordinator? Are you going to take a step back from the offense? And whoever you hire, let them run the offense. If you hire Kellen Moore, if you hire Eric Bieniemy, are you going to let them run their offense? Because their offense isn't your 5 plays of offense. They're going to come in here and want to run the ball. The more time that goes by, Belichick or Harbaugh will be, well, yeah.
I don't think like, and Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, it's not their way to go with a big name. Like, I don't think Belichick or Harbaugh is in the book. Well, Harbaugh hasn't even been rumored. Like, if at any point he was going to be rumored to Philadelphia or he had any intent on maybe coming to Philadelphia, a report would have come out by now. But I still don't even think Bill Belichick would. Like, I don't know
about that, because I think that they like to keep things hush hush when it comes to who again, nobody knew who Nick Sirianni was, nobody knew who Nick Sirianni was when they hired him. Nobody thought Doug Peterson was going to be the hot guy when they hired him. Chip Kelly, there was talk of it, but then he was going to go back to college, and then boom, Chip Kelly became the coach of the Eagles. So I disagree with that, because I think that if they're going to hire a Belichick, which I don't think it'll be Belichick, they're going to hire a Harbaugh, they're going to hire a Vrabel, even after they potentially fire Sirianni, they would keep that under wrap. Like, that's one thing about the front office. They don't let things leak that much, especially if they don't want it to leak. Now, there have been stories over the last couple of days, but I think that's more of coaches trying to save their asses, players trying to save their asses, front office trying to be like, if they make a move, be like, well, we made a move because of this. But if they wanted to go out there and hire a big name, you wouldn't hear about it until, oh, by the way, head coach X is now the head coach of the Eagles.
I just see them, like, if they were making a hire, a Johnson, a Slovak, a Munkin, seem like the direction they would go over a Belichick and Harbaugh, just based off of history. But I mean, to the same point, has there ever been these types of names available? Like, this is probably one of the craziest coaching cycles you're ever going to see. Yeah. So, like, they haven't had the chance to have a Bill Belichick or Jim Harbaugh, potentially a Mike Tomlin, a Mike Vrabel even. Like, there's going to be some of these guys who were supposed to get jobs aren't going to get head coaching jobs this year just because of what the head coaching free agency looks like right now. It's crazy to think, but like, I think Ben Johnson will get it, but maybe a Slovak or a Munkin may have to prove themselves for another season. Like, you might not see them get jobs right away because of
Ben Johnson's getting hired.
Ben Johnson's a lock. To me, he's a lock to get
Washington
a job.
Or Carolina. Slovak probably might have to wait another year. But like, Atlanta is probably going to, Atlanta interviewed Belichick. Like,
there's some mutual interest there. Yeah. And Harbaugh really seems to like LA. So
there's no scenario that Sirianni can come back after the way he lost the team. So I get why you think he lost the team, and I tend to agree with that. But if you watch the interviews after, there were a bunch of players that were like, Sirianni should be back. There were a lot of players, like, they still will play for him. I think a lot of the angst comes from the coordinators. And
I agree.
Again, they didn't know who was calling the offensive plays. But like, so that's where I think if he has to go in with a plan, and like Connor said, it has to be, I will take a step back from the offense. Whoever we bring in, it'll be their offense. They run the offense. And that's what it would need to be. Sirianni can be the hype man, whatever. He can do all the things that we liked when we were winning all those games. What he did in Kansas City, last year in Indianapolis, cheering with the crowd, saying that was for Frank Reich, this, that, and the third. He can go back to being that. But they need to have a game plan he needs to have a game plan for what he's going to do at the coordinators. And again, before all these staffs start to take shape, he needs to do that like now. Or they need to do that now.
And Michael says if they're going to keep Sirianni, then Howie has to go get a good offensive and defensive coordinator now and not be playing around. We agree that they have to go now and start doing that, but I do think in a way Sirianni somewhat has to be involved in the process because you need to be able to connect. Or else it's just going to be like this year all over again, where Sirianni's in his own office, in his own wing of the Link or Novaplex or whatever. And then the offensive and defensive coordinator don't even connect with him or interact with him, because that's almost what it felt like this year. Although I think offensively he had too much interaction and hands in the pot there. I think he just didn't interact at all defensively with the defensive coordinator. And that's why it made the move so easy. And then we also have to think about it in that way. Like, look what they did to Sean Desai. How many big name guys are going to say, yeah, I want to come to a team who just did that to their defensive coordinator? Like, I feel like you may have a hard time getting necessarily the hire you want, because people are going to be like, you see what you just did to Sean Desai? Like, he's a good guy or whatever, and you just blackballed him and put Matt Patricia down on the sidelines. Like, you just don't really know at the end of the day, like, how it's all going to go down and if you're going to get the hire that you want. But Sirianni has to have some involvement because it's going to be his coaching staff at the end of the day, and you need to have positive interaction with them, and you need to be able to be a part of the rooms and be able to be that hype man and not just be completely disconnected.
Yeah, this is going to be a very, very interesting offseason. One that's ending a lot sooner than we thought it was going to end. But there are a lot of issues. A lot of things are going to have to take shape. This is going to be before free agency, before the draft, coaching staff. Like, who would have thought Michael Clay is going to be the guy that's going to be safe? We wanted him gone last year, and obviously it's a good thing that
Michael Clay and Jeff Stoutland are the only two people who for sure have jobs next year. Otherwise, any of these guys could be gone. Any of them.
Let's see. Hi, Jenny. How you doing? John says Laurie and Roseman are the problem. Ergo, nothing will ever change. You might have a point there. Like,
he's not completely incorrect. Like, you see the way Laurie's hands-on. He's not hands-on in the way like Jerry Jones, where he has his own show on the radio and, he talks a lot. Like, Laurie's more, he doesn't talk a lot, but he's got his hands in the pot behind the scenes. No hire happens without his stamp of approval and stuff. He's in on the interviews. Laurie's involved. Roseman, we know Howie Roseman from time to time. He can make good financial decisions. And if we could just find a way to call him the director of finance and pay him the same amount of money and get him to step back. Me and you have already said that, like, probably at least a couple times every season. We would be all for it. Give him a fancy name that warrants the money you're going to pay him, but get him out of the managerial role and that type of decision-making role, especially with personnel. So John could be onto something, and we haven't disagreed on that point. Laurie will not go away. He's the owner. That just isn't going to happen. He's always going to have his hands in the pot. But Howie Roseman, there's a way to get him a bit more out of the mix.
The question could become how much of an input his son Julian has, because his son's the analytics guy, apparently. So that could be the big question. Walter says, sorry, Sirianni had a Kotite collapse. He has to go. So that's funny you bring that up, because Seth Joyner was on WIP today, and he was asked, like, which was worse, the Kotite collapse, like, or who's worse, Kotite or Sirianni? And Seth Joyner said without hesitation that it was Kotite. Nobody was as bad as Kotite. So I get what you're saying, like, they're comparable, but Kotite's still worse.
Yeah, Sirianni, like, you still, there's a reason you can still side with keeping Nick Sirianni. The 3 straight years in the playoffs, the Super Bowl run just a year ago. There's reasons to stick with him, but there's also reasons to move on from him. So you can go on either side of this. But I think like what we've been saying, it's all going to come down to that meeting that he has with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, and can he devise a plan that they can buy into, because they're big plan people. This is, that this meeting's happening probably once they're back in Philadelphia and everyone's all comfortable again. This meeting could happen tomorrow, could happen the next day. It's going to happen this week. And they're going to sit down just like they did with Doug. It could have happened today, and we're just waiting to hear what comes out of it. But that they're doing the same thing that they did with Peterson, and they're going to want a concrete plan. And we know Doug Peterson was not willing to move on from Press Taylor, and that was one of the sticking points that got him fired, although there's probably more to that story than just that. But there's going to need, he needs to give up control of the offense. He has to. It just has to be, like I said, it's a fireable offense for him to not have that as part of his plan. To me, if that is not part of his plan, you have every right to fire him. And I mean, 90% Philly, like I said, would be 100% happy with the decision. I'm indifferent. If he can come up with a plan that has him step back completely from the offense and him be the hype man, him be the guy, just be the culture guy, whatever, hype man, culture guy, whatever it is, cool. But otherwise, I don't see a reason for him to stay. But I'm indifferent if he stays. If it's a good plan, cool. If he stays and things remain the same and you just put new coordinators, not happy with that. If you fire him and you bring in a really good coach, really good young coach, or a really good one of these experienced coaches, and they bring in a really good staff and start to turn things around, good. But I'm indifferent altogether about the entire thing. I'm not one of the guys who's saying Howie. I'm not saying he has to go no matter what.
If Sirianni got fired, does he get hired as a head coach?
It's funny because I think I was watching Get Up the other day, and they said the same thing. If you think that your head coach would get hired, don't let him go. And this was this guy's defensive Mike McCarthy. If you let Mike McCarthy go, he's getting hired.
Is he?
It was his defense. I can't remember who said it, but that's what they said. I don't think Sirianni would get another job. Nick Sirianni wasn't going to get a job without Philadelphia.
That's true.
Philadelphia was the reason he got a job. And I think at this point, all these other teams are looking at that collapse. All these teams are looking at this potential free agency of head coaches. Nick Sirianni would probably be near the bottom of the pile, especially when you think of all these rumors about the control on the offense. And if it was him, if it wasn't him, there's way better offensive minds out there. Why risk it with a guy who has a high school offensive coordinator mindset? You just don't, that philosophy is just not going to work. So I personally don't think he would get another job. And personally, based on the free agency list, I don't think a Mike McCarthy would get another job. These guys that had these collapses this year would not get jobs this cycle. I don't think Sirianni would ever get another one personally, but I do think a Mike McCarthy would get another shot. Yeah, maybe a team. When desperate times come and you don't have this type of coach in free agency, there is, I agree with you. There's a chance someone could get desperate and say, I'll take Sirianni. I'll give him a shot.
I mean, he has three playoff appearances in 3 years as a head coach.
And a Super Bowl appeance. So
you
can't completely discount it.
Yeah. All right. So before we finish off, we do it during the regular season. We'll do it during the playoffs as well this week, and maybe we'll do it if we continue, depending on what stories we get over the next couple of weeks. The unheralded player of the week in the National Football League. You got somebody from the Super Wildcard Weekend.
I mean, I'm going to go with Romeo Doubs. I know it's kind of like he's not all that unknown, but it's really impressive what the Packers were able to do. 48-32 sounds closer than it really was. We saw garbage time Dak kick it into high gear. But
garbage time Dak? Yeah, man.
Yep, exactly. So, I'm going to go with Romeo Doubs. He went 6 for 151 and 1. A huge part to the Packers win. There was a ton of Packers who you could name, I guess. But, it's hard to, Romeo Doubs has been there. Rashee Rice, you could go with. These guys have been there, and I think we've named them this past season. But I think it's the playoffs. There's a slightly different rule for me because you run out of names. So, but I'm going with Romeo Doubs.
Does CJ Stroud count as a unheralded player?
It's extremely impressive what he did in his first playoff appearance. Like they shredded
16
the
and the
Rams.
number one, pretty much like the number one defense in the NFL. He went 16 to 21, 274, 3 touchdowns. Um, yeah, he was really good. My other one would have been Christian Harris, the linebacker for the Texans. 7 tackles, a sack, an interception return for a touchdown. What they did to Cleveland, whoo-wee, they went what the rookie quarterback and the rookie coach and D'Amico Ryans are doing with that. I asked somebody this question while this game was going on as it was ending. Do the Texans have a brighter future than the Philadelphia Eagles right now?
I would say
I
yes.
would say yeah.
I would say yes.
Look,
Because
I'm not a Stroud fan. Again, I was not high on Stroud. I don't think Ohio State quarterbacks are very good. He's proved me wrong, obviously. But they have a young quarterback. Their defense is really good with Will Anderson, Nico Collins, really good. Like they've built a really good culture, built a really good team in Houston. So yeah, I'm gonna go CJ Stroud, Christian Harris. They look really, really good against a Browns team that was playing with like 100-year-old Joe Flacco, yeah, but that defense is still really good. And I know
you knew the Flacco comeback was going to end eventually. You knew that that victory lap had to end eventually, and it didn't look very good.
Yeah. So, Michael, I do agree with you with the CJ Stroud from this past week. All right. We appreciate everybody that's tuned in this season as the Eagles season has come to an end. Unless there's big news, unless something breaks, I don't know how everybody else feels, but we need like some unwinding time after what we went through this year. And it's both Eagles wise and personally wise for the both of Connor and I. So it's a good time to wind down. But
we'll be back for like if Sirianni gets fired or both coordinators get let go, we'll come back and we'll do a show talking about who we want as the coordinators, who do we want to replace as a head coach. I mean, and then otherwise we'll be back after the Super Bowl probably and start doing some off season.
Maybe we'll do a show leading up to the Super Bowl, give our predictions, kind of preview
do a little
that.
preview,
but definitely, draft time, free agency time. Obviously, like Connor said, if a move is made at the head coaching position, coordinator position, we'll definitely, come back on, do a show. But we appreciate everybody that's tuned in this year. We hope you enjoyed our show. We all the comments that we get throughout every show, you guys help the time go by quickly. A lot of the time, it doesn't even feel like we've been here for an hour doing the show. So we thank you all for tuning in. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. You can follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. You can follow me on Twitter at LJ54. Follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. So for Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.